The women are knitting as they eagerly listen to the granddaddy spin yet another fantastic tale of his exploits fighting pirates on the high seas. A crackling fire keeps them warm as heavy rains fall through the night sky onto the rooftop of their log cabin. Just as you have now been transported via your imagination to a distant time and another place, they've been carried along by the steam of their imaginations with the wings of the storyteller's magic carpet to a place and time likely far removed from their own. Long before the internet, television, radio, movies, there was the written word. Farther back, way farther back, there was the spoken word. People have been communicating with one another ever since human beings first walked the earth. Certainly animals communicate, each species in its particular way. Yet the ability to imagine in the abstract revealed through language and art is recognized as a uniquely human trait. And that is, so the ancient art of storytelling, which comes of that abstract, that thinking in the infinite, that imagination, is what we are about to celebrate. So sit back and just get cozy in your by the fireside, real or imagined, and listen to the stories that follow, filtered through all the colors of your own unique imagination. This is, whenever, I just want to say, whenever you read a story, and I'm talking about fiction now, the author had to use their imagination to come up with it, obviously. But each individual who listens or reads is going to see it differently because it's not a movie. Everything isn't laid out. You don't see all of the colors. You don't really know precisely what the characters look like. So you have to fill in the blanks. So you become a partner with the author in actually finishing that story in your own mind and in your own imagination. So you're a very important component. Without the reader or listener, there would be no point in the author writing the stories. Okay, so thank you all for coming, and congratulations. You're in it with us all now. Okay. All right, this is Otto Slotto. Otto Sloan, landscape artist, was drifting along, appreciating the snowy winter landscape in his native Idaho. He was in search of hibernating animals, hopefully a bear or two, a great subject for a silent, scenic painting. There was something peaceful and comforting about hibernation, if only he, Otto, could have the freedom to hibernate too. But he knew he had no such freedom, at least not now in his middle age. As he gazed at the white-capped distant mountain ridge, he thought of his mounting bills. He owed premiums for the mortgage, health insurance, car insurance, homeowner's insurance, and life insurance. That last one, life insurance, particularly bothered him. Strange name for something that was really insurance if he were to die prematurely. Otto thought of his wife, Mary, and his 17-year-old daughter, Allison. Mary sang at town meetings and at local weddings. Her voice had been sweet as ever, singing the national anthem at the 4th of July extravaganza. But all that brought in relatively little money, and Allison would need money for college soon. The pressure Otto felt made him feel heavy, confined. He finished his painting, his search for hibernating animals having proved fruitless. Otto drove his pickup truck to the nearest convenience store. He needed a cup of coffee. He parked and headed inside. A sign said, "Lottery tickets sold here." What the heck, Otto thought. He had never bought a lotto ticket before. Mary always insisted it was a surefire waste of money, but the lucky winner, one person in Idaho, would win $50 million. And another customer, an old man buying beef jerky and beer, said, "If it seems too good to be true, it probably is." The old man shook his head as Otto paid his lotto dollar. Otto drank his coffee and drove to another snowy, scenic spot. Again, he searched for hibernating animals. This time he found a large black bear in a cave and proceeded to paint. It was so rare, finding a subject like that for his paintings. Otto felt hopeful, lucky. Otto finished his work, put his easel, paints, canvas, and assorted items back into the pickup. He checked results for winning tickets on his smartphone. Mary was probably right about the odds. The old man at the convenience store probably had good reason to shake his head. And yet, Otto compared the numbers on his ticket with those being displayed on the screen. He rubbed his eyes, checked again. The numbers matched. Otto got into his pickup and headed to the Boise lottery headquarters. Anticipation and relief flooded his whole being. He would never have to work, never have to worry again. Otto entered the lottery headquarters and presented the winning ticket to the young woman in charge. She scrutinized it, then smiled at him. "Congratulations," she said to Otto. In moments, people were snapping Otto's picture to be uploaded to every news and social media platform imaginable. Reporters from a variety of radio stations were interviewing him. Otto Sloan would be a household name all over Idaho. Otto couldn't wait to share the good news with Mary and Allison. Otto's phone started ringing. It was Pete Olson, his cousin in Cheyenne. "Congrats, Otto. I heard the good news while I was driving and had to let you know how happy I am for you." Otto had not heard from Pete in over 3 years, and that was only through a group email announcing the birth of his grandson. Actually, Pete's son-in-law had sent out the message. But it was nice being recognized now, wasn't it? "Oh, Otto," Pete was saying, "I've been having trouble lately with my mortgage payments. Think you could spare 20 grand? We'll see," Otto said uneasily. He probably should talk to Mary first. Similar calls plagued him for the balance of the day. Worse calls from every scam artist in the state and outside the state. When Otto arrived at his home, he was greeted by television crews. Mary did not smile. She was fond of her privacy. The Internal Revenue Service was calling. Otto's tax bill for his winnings would be $20 million, just so he would know. In the following days, Otto received messages by fax, by email, by voicemail, by snail mail. He started getting piles and piles of junk mail offers. Was he interested in buying a ranch in Patagonia? Did he want his own island off of British Columbia? Wouldn't he be delighted with a gold-trimmed yacht? The messages were relentless. Old classmates, ex-girlfriends, old church ladies were pounding him with requests. Mary was threatening divorce. Otto was checking out psychiatrists on the internet. At least he could afford their fees, right? His bedroom phone started ringing. He was afraid to answer. Maybe it was a call from the mob. The ringing awakened Otto. It was his mortgage lender, politely reminding him his payment was 2 days past due. Otto breathed a sigh of relief. The nightmare was over. Mary leaned over and gave him a warm good morning kiss. Otto greeted the day with alacrity. Dreams of wealth and hibernation were happily things of the past. Otto Sloan, landscape artist, celebrated his craft, his calling, and his anonymity. What happens? Let's see. I will. All right, this story is called The Merry-Go-Round. All right, now it's being told by a woman who we're not identifying what her name is, but she's like a small town Iowa woman, and she's kind of, you can just imagine she's chit-chatting with some ladies and she's telling over some gossip. Okay. I got this story from Eliza Babcock, so you never know what was her reputation for exaggerating and all. But I get the sense that it actually happened, though some of the details may be a little off. Anyway, Eliza is close friends with the mayor's wife, Marjorie Mann, so she should know. When Marty Mann became mayor of Pinckneyville, Iowa, population 866, they had a celebration in the town square. Just about everybody in town was well aware of Mayor Marty's having a heart of gold, which is why they voted him in, even though Tony Tribbett probably wanted the job more. But I'll get back to that part of the story later. Now, Mayor Mann's granddaughter Ginny, who was only 4 years old at the time, wanted to ride on the merry-go-round, which was situated in the town square and right in the middle of the inaugural celebration. So Mayor Marty picks up Ginny and puts her up on the turquoise and gold painted pony and starts heading back down the stairs to wait with the other grown-ups. Well, Ginny calls to her grandpa, "Come back! How will I know the way home?" So Mayor Marty goes back up, puts his arm around Ginny, and reassures her. He stays with her the whole ride, round and round, but explains to her that the horse she's on will go right back to where she started from, right across from where her mom and grandma are watching on the green bench. What goes around comes around, says Mayor Marty. Now, Tony Tribbett was at the mayoral celebration, but Marjorie Mann remembers very clearly how he seemed to be fuming and never cracked a smile the whole time. Marjorie was sure, and Eliza couldn't have agreed more, that Tony was scheming. Figuring how he could get back at Marty for having the gall to win. Tony had spent good money on advertising, had smiled at the cameras till his lips cracked, but he only managed to get a third of the votes cast, with Mayor Marty Mann, getting all the rest. At the time, there were 2 decent restaurants in Pinckneyville, the Menu Venue, which is owned by the Mann family, and Tony's Tableau, owned by the Tribbetts. Both these establishments had been doing well for years, though the Menu Venue had tastier food and gentler music, so it was the choice anybody with any real sense would pick if they could find an empty table. But the Tribbetts must have been doing okay because they had 2 cars and a nice 2-story house. Anyhow, no sooner had the popcorn been swept up from the mayor's celebration than Tribbett hatched his plan. As he was having a shave and a haircut at Bill's barbershop, Tony says to Bill, "You know, Bill, I feel I need to warn you about something, but don't say nothing to nobody. I wouldn't want it to get around." Well, of course, Bill was all ears. "What's that?" Now, it's been common knowledge in town like forever that Bill has a real weak stomach. So Tribbett says, "Look, Bill, I wouldn't say nothing, but I gotta warn you, what with your weak stomach and all, you gotta stay away from Marty Mann's eating establishment. A customer told me they found a fly in the soup, and the dishes didn't even look clean. As a restaurant owner, I know how important it is to maintain the highest standards. I guess, now that Marty's the mayor, he's just too busy to pay attention to those details anymore." Bill wasn't sure if he could actually trust Tony, but he didn't want to take any chances. So he quit going to the Menu Venue. Now, Bill didn't like to gossip, but he felt he had a duty to tell people just in case. So he told them. Every guy who went in for a haircut, with or without a shave, got the skinny on the mayor's restaurant. It was all a lot of mumbo-jumbo, of course. Since the mayor's wife really runs the restaurant, Marty's becoming the mayor made no difference in the daily running of the place. Anyway, Marjorie Mann pays real close attention to details, which is why everything about her is super perfect, especially her restaurant. Well, being that hardly anybody actually believed Tony's story, it had no noticeable effect on a man's business. But people in Pinckneyville are not stupid, and they figured out it was a cock and bull story invented by Tribbett. So they stopped going to Tony's Tableau. Now, as time went on, Tribbett started having a financial setback. He had to let all but one of his waiters go, and he started skimping on portion sizes. He was getting to the point where he'd have to close down the restaurant or maybe go bankrupt. His oldest son, Trevor, was finishing up college and had just gotten into medical school up in Des Moines. Well, the money Tony had set aside, so medical school was taken off the table. Now, Marty is no dummy, and he was fully aware of Tony's shenanigans, which would have made a mere mortal mad as a hatter, but not Marty Mann. He just shrugged his shoulders and got on with his life. Meanwhile, Trevor Tribbett, who was kind, smart, and gracious, was feeling confused and downright unhappy about his family's financial downturn.
Being away at college during this whole episode, he wasn't privy to what had led up to the situation. When he went home for spring break, his dad broke the bad news to him. Trevor was aware that his folks had taken a hit, but they waited till he was sitting in front of them at the kitchen table before they laid it all out. "I'm real sorry, Trevor," says his dad, "but there's nothing I can do. You won't be able to become a doctor, but you'll find some line of work, I'm sure. You'll have your college diploma to fall back on after all." Trevor had dreamed of being a doctor from the time he was a little kid, and he looked like he'd just gotten kicked in the stomach, got up, went to his room, and locked the door. It broke his mom's heart, and she just started sobbing and blaming Tony because she knew what he had done. She told Tony either he had to set things right financially or she was through with him. But by now, Tony Trudette was an outcast in town. Everybody knew what he tried to do to their kind mayor. Nobody would give Trudette the time of day. Nobody, that is, except for maybe the man with the heart of gold. So Tony goes to Mayor Marty hat in hand and tells him how sorry he is about the mean story he cooked up and hopes the man can find it in his heart to forgive him. And sure enough, Mayor Marty says, "No problem, Tony. I can tell you'll never tell a tall tale like that again." And he actually smiles at Tony. Then Tony tells him how much trouble he's in financially and how Trevor's life's dream has been shattered. So Mayor Marty uses his connections and gets Trudette a good, well-paying job as maitre d' at a classy restaurant, Chez Provence in Pottstown, 10 miles away. Trudette closes down his own restaurant, but he gets an advance from the owner of Chez Provence, and he's able to keep his house, his cars, and Trevor's path to becoming a doctor. The Trudettes, though no longer at poverty's doorstep, were feeling uncomfortable as could be in Pinckneyville after the whole episode with Tony's slimy slander. They were basically shunned by just about everybody, so they sold their house and moved to Pottstown, which was more convenient besides. Meanwhile, Trevor was going to medical school. Now, Trevor had never found out about his dad's rotten scheme, and the good folks of Pinckneyville had nothing against the young man. Besides, Trevor was raised in the town, and he wanted to return and open his medical practice there. Until then, people had to travel to Pottstown, or even further to see a doctor. So 6 years after his parents had moved away, Trevor returned. The day after Trevor gets back, he goes to get a haircut and shave at Bill's shop. And Bill's real happy to see him after all these years. "Well, well, if it isn't Trevor Trudette," says Bill. "What have you been up to, my boy?" "I got my medical degree 2 years ago and recently finished a residency in general medicine up in Des Moines," Trevor tells him. "I'm married and have a little girl, and we've just moved back to town." "You mean we'll actually have a local doc?" Bill is genuinely happy, and especially happy it's going to be Trevor. "Yes, I think I found the right office space to rent, just a block from Pinckneyville Town Square." "Perfect location," Bill says approvingly. "You'll be able to wave at your daughter when she's riding the merry-go-round right from your office." "I'm sure looking forward to that," Trevor says. "In fact, right after my haircut, I'm heading over to the merry-go-round to meet my wife and daughter." So Trevor finishes up, looks real spiffy, pays Bill, and heads over to meet his Lizzie and Franny. When he gets to the merry-go-round, he sees Lizzie has her arm around Franny as she sits on a fancy pink and gold pony. Franny waves at her daddy as he takes a seat on the green bench across from the merry-go-round. Shortly after Trevor sits down, old Mayor Marty, who's now done mayoring and has since retired, arrives with his granddaughter Ginny. Ginny goes up the steps to the merry-go-round, hands her ticket to the attendant, and gets on the biggest horse of all, a white stallion with gold reins. She's sucking on a nice big candy, smiling, and then starts laughing. She's having so much fun. But within a couple of minutes, she isn't laughing or even smiling anymore. As Ginny's horse comes into view, Trevor notices Ginny's face is red and she looks scared as heck. Trevor jumps up, yells to the ride attendant to stop the ride, and rushes over to Ginny. He asks her if she has something in her throat, and she puts up her hand. She can't talk, and he takes it to mean yes. Then he holds Ginny upside down, whacks her on the back, and out pops the big purple candy, just like that. After Ginny catches her breath, Trevor asks her if she's okay, and she nods yes. Trevor walks her down to her grandfather, who is relieved and grateful as can be. Marty thanks Trevor a whole bunch of times and asks Ginny if she's okay. You know what helped me, Grandpa? Remember when I was little and it was my first ride on the merry-go-round and I was scared? You stayed with me and you said, what goes around comes around. And that's what helped me know that pretty soon I'd see you and everything would be okay. You're absolutely right. What goes around comes around. Marty then smiles at Ginny and shakes Dr. Trevor's hand.
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
Any questions? Comments? Okay, my life. I'm normally a very private person and would never have considered sharing my secrets with the world. But I'm on such a high right now that I even share them with my mother. I'm 38 years old and next in line to become the CEO of an up-and-coming tech company where I already earn a healthy salary. I live alone in a large Italian Renaissance-style home in Beverly Hills, though I do have 2 white Labradors in my backyard. I have very definite ideas about what I like and what I don't. This includes the way I travel, the teams I root for, and the foods I enjoy, just to give you an idea. Now, about 2 months ago, I started checking out airlines as I had to give a presentation in Manhattan. I came across an ad for a relatively new airline on Merry Float Airlines. What intrigued me was a promotion they were running called Pie in the Sky. The deal was every meal on every flight included a hefty pie wedge for dessert. The list of pies included apple, cherry, pumpkin, and several others. As I read, my mouth began watering. I got hooked on apple pie as a kid visiting my paternal grandparents every Thanksgiving. My grandmother's apple pies were the stuff of family lore and legend. Speaking of family, you may wonder why I live alone. That is why I'm still single. My mother has been on my case regarding this for years, especially because I'm an only child. Derek, she would say, you have dated such nice girls, but nobody is ever good enough for you. Picky, picky, picky. And my reply would typically be, I'll get married after I meet the woman of my dreams. To which Mom would invariably respond, Derek, that's pie in the sky. I give up. You'll never get married. But I digress. I checked the online reviews on the airline's website, and the pies got 4.9 out of 5 stars, with 4.7 for their overall service. So with such favorable ratings, I immediately made round-trip reservations, Los Angeles to New York. I don't like to risk sitting next to some busybody, so I usually buy 2 seats for myself in business class when I fly commercially, which is what I did this time. I enjoyed the pie as promised on my flight out to New York. On the flight back to California, however, things got dicey. I had just finished my tasty vegetarian meal when the flight attendant brought me the pie. As you know, I have my heart set on apple pie. Hello, sir, she began. I have cherry pie, pumpkin pie, and blueberry pie today. Which would you like? Apple pie, I said. I'm so sorry, she said. Apple pie has been a bit more popular on this flight than we expected. All the apple pie is gone, but I bet you'll love our pumpkin pie, my personal favorite. No, forget it. I was really looking forward to having apple pie. I guess I just won't get dessert on this flight. The flight attendant had no problem handling my disappointment. She just walked away, heading to easier to please passengers when this amazing young lady in her early 30s approached me. Excuse me, she began. I couldn't help overhearing the conversation with the flight attendant. They served me apple pie, but I requested a doggy box to take it home to my roommate. But hey, she'd probably be better off without it. Anyway, she wasn't expecting it, so you're welcome to it if you like. She smiled the most winning smile as her sky blue eyes lit up. Wow, are you sure? I mean, don't you want it for yourself? We still have about 2 hours left till we get to LA. Absolutely. I don't eat pie or cake or cookies. I couldn't help noticing that she looked like a model, so her admission wasn't all that surprising. Okay then, sure. But please don't tell your roommate she just missed out on the best apple pie in the sky. Mum's the word, she said as she went to fetch me the doggy box. In the 2 minutes she was gone, I started craving the pie and her. She returned, handed me the doggy box, and I dug in. I invited her to sit with me as I had this empty seat next to me. We got talking, though she did most of the talking as I ate the pie. Her voice was sweet, her eyes laughed as she told me about her life, and I realized I recognized her, though I had never met her before. She was the woman of my dreams. She gave me her business card. It said, Candace 4 Canines, Candace Mills, DVM, the dog doc. She has her own office in Westwood Village, just blocks from her home. She told me she had 2 border collies, and we arranged a play date with them and my Labradors at Roxbury Park. We've been walking our dogs early every morning since then, before work. Though Candace doesn't eat apple pie, she loves apples. Her favorite variety is Granny Smith. I told her about my own Granny Smith, the one who introduced me to apple pie. Candace is looking forward to meeting my spunky grandmother when we go to her 100th birthday party in La Jolla next month. Oh, and I plan to introduce Candace to my mother, who will have good reason to believe she too may someday become a Granny Smith. And that possibility, I might add, is no pie in the sky. Any questions? Totally relaxed. And that's when I get my creative ideas, okay? So then I go over to my little desk in my bedroom and I start writing, okay? And sometimes it's still dark outside and I'm just writing and writing and writing, right? And then later, when I'm dressed and have my shoes on, that's when I do the editing. So it seems to me like, they say there are 2 hemispheres, your right hemisphere, your left hemisphere. You're right, that's more creative, math, and art and stuff, happen on that side, and then we've got the verbal on the left side. So basically, I think I use both, but I do my creative stuff early in the morning, and then I do the editing later in the day when I actually am rational. And so the thing is that, to me, writing stories, but especially fiction, is like doing a jigsaw puzzle, right? So that's why I haven't done a novel yet, because I feel it would be such a massive jigsaw puzzle. But I'm thinking about doing it actually with one of the stories, not that I read today, that I have in that book. But in any event, so the thing is that you notice that there's a reason for everything I present in a story, right? So for like my son was mentioning to me recently, Chekhov said he was one of the greatest storytellers of all time, right? Or at least in the last few hundred years. He said, if you have a gun in Act 1, it better go off in Act 3. Okay, right? So when I tell you about apple pie, of course that apple pie is going to be important later, right? Mm-hmm. So, or if I tell you about the merry-go-round, you know that the merry-go-round is going to figure importantly in the story later. There are little subtleties I also use as a writer, like when I talk about, for example, with Otto. So in the beginning, I'm telling you that Otto is drifting along, okay? I'm not saying he's driving, okay? But you get the sense that he is. Why is he drifting along? Because I'm giving you a little hint that this is a dream, okay? Because when you're driving, you've got to be alert, okay? But why is he drifting? So there are tiny little things along the way in a story, little hints that I give the reader. Now, I know not every reader is going to pick up on it, and I hope every reader will read my stories more than once. Although I do have a couple of stories that are just comedy, and, that's kind of the horse of a different color, as they say. But in general, when I'm writing, as most of my work is serious stuff, that I'm going to insert little cues and little hints. And I assume I have intelligent readers because I think it's literary fiction really, that it's sometimes the vocabulary is beyond what a lot of people know or whatever. Look, and so I feel that if you're going to benefit from it, you're going to be intelligent, and I really write to an intelligent group, and that's who I spoke to today. And so whether or not you ask me questions, I know that you're registering it and you're paying attention to the details. And So anyway, so that's important. And as I was mentioning before about the idea of the jigsaw puzzle, so sometimes you see, anybody who's worked a jigsaw puzzle, even if it's many years ago, you'll remember. So you have different colors and different shapes, and you're like trying to get it into, but then it's close, but it's not exactly right. And so writing a story is like that, where I'm sort of, it's like a sculptor, I think, where you get the basic idea. Let's say you're going to make a picture of a woman, all right. So you get the basic idea and maybe the basic idea of the hair and all of that, but then you're going to fine tune it. And so with writing stories, it takes a lot of fine tuning. Now there's an old saying, maybe, and many of you have heard, you write standing up and edit sitting down. And it's really true, because I can come up with a story sometimes in one day, and I will spend a month editing it. And after I edit it, I'm not done. Then I'll show it to someone else, and they'll see, hey, wait a minute, didn't you see this? And why did I overlook it? It's my story. But still, they'll notice something, and that little nuance, that little difference, just like with the jigsaw puzzle analogy, right, can make a difference. So even though you thought that you were really close and it looked like the right piece, it wasn't, And so that fine-tuning, again, takes a really long time, but it's worth it, because ultimately you want a story that has the theme and the objective that you have as a writer to come across to the reader or listener. And you want it to ring true, at least with what I write, which is realistic fiction. And I know my son was just telling me, he was listening to Ben Shapiro the other day, maybe it was yesterday, and he said Ben Shapiro was saying, I hope somebody comes along to revive that short story genre. I was at Warwick's yesterday. They have like virtually nothing in short stories. Now I independently published on Amazon, so anyway, that's another story. But the thing is, speaking of stories, to me, short story is so like part of me, because as I was telling some of you who came in early, I've been telling stories and being sort of a co-author with my dad, may he rest in peace, ever since I can remember. I was 2.5 when we moved. I was born in Appalachia, then we lived in Florida when I was a toddler. When I was 2.5, we moved to LA, and I grew up in LA. And from that point, I remember co-authoring stories with my father. So he would say, like, he'd come up with, there's a girl with a birthday party, something appropriate for a little kid, and he'd say, but I don't remember, what color was her dress? And I'd say, pink. And he said, yeah, how did you know? Right? You're right. Okay, so I was getting a lot of positive feedback, a lot of positive reinforcement from my dad. Oh, but I forgot, what was her name? And I go, Melissa. Yeah, how did you know? Right? And so we sort of became co-authors, and we would do these stories. And as I got older, I would make up my own stories, and I told stories to my baby sister, who was 11 years younger than I was. And when I was at UCLA, when I was in college, she was a little kid, and I'm telling her stories. We shared a room, and my dad would be knocking on the door. The time has come, the walrus said, like I should go to bed, right? But she'd be laughing, and I told stories to our 4 sons when they were little kids, and so because of my experience with my dad, I always said, hey, whatever idea they had, that's exactly right. Because a story, especially when you're telling kids, it can go any different direction. So of course I have control. I'm in the driver's seat as an author, writing stories that I want to publish. But when you're telling stories to a little child, you want them to feel like they're part of it, as long as it's appropriate, So that, anyway, that gives you some idea. And before I did short stories long on life, this book, I love it. My son is actually my website designer, logo person, editor-in-chief, and he did this cover. Anyway, so before I did that, I actually had my only son, Justin, in June. That was 4 months ago, and that's when the problems began. Now, don't misunderstand. Justin is delighted to be married to the girl of his dreams. Casey looks like a model for a soap commercial. Slim, clean, healthy, wholesome, and energetic. She's also sweet, smart, and quilts by hand. So with all these positive attributes, you may wonder why I'm so annoyed. Okay, here goes. Justin is 31 years old. He dated Casey for 2 years, including the engagement, before he married her. Before he met Casey, Justin dated Peggy, Priscilla, Ashley, Heather, and Ursula. They were all nice girls, though maybe not quite as pretty as Casey. Of course, Ursula's name was a bit unusual, but what the heck. Anyway, of all the girls he ever dated, all with acceptable names and credentials, Justin had to fall in love with Casey. I should have warned my son what would happen if he were to tie the knot with this or any Casey. So now I feel guilty, though I did drop hints. For instance, I suggested the band play Henry VIII by Herman's Hermits for the groom's walk down the aisle. Justin just said, "Mom, how many chocolate bonbons have you eaten today?" He does have a point. Okay, I admit I have had a bonbon addiction. But what does that have to do with the problem at hand? I suppose that's what I get for beating around the bush. Actually, I've been beating around the bush the whole time I've been griping here. Okay, as you may have guessed, I don't like the just-in-case jokes. But now that he's married to Casey, they've gotten much worse and even more personal. Like friends are always joking, "We'll be bringing an extra bottle of wine just in Casey." Or they'll say, "I hope they set up the prenuptials just in Casey." Oh, and another thing, my sister-in-law, who is married to my husband's younger brother, is Casey. But her husband's name is not Justin, so I never objected. Now, because we have 2 Caseys in the family, I'm afraid of an impending disaster on Thanksgiving and every family get-together to come. I can just see it now. Someone will say, "Casey, please pass the ketchup," and then both Caseys will reach for it. Or worse, neither one bothers leaving the task up to the other Casey. I very nicely asked my new daughter-in-law if she would consider dumping her sobriquet, Casey, in favor of her proper given name, Cassandra. She just gave me that same funny look Justin had given me when he suggested I was maybe hitting the bonbons again. Now the plot thickens. Just yesterday, Justin called to tell me to fasten my seatbelt because, da-da-da-da-da-dum, I have a grandbaby on the way, due in May. I was so excited. I know I will be a wonderful grandmother, giving the child whatever they want, no matter what. As soon as I hung up with Justin, I swore off the bonbons. I decided I had too much to live for to carry around all that extra weight. Besides, I had no time for such indulgences anymore. I had to go shopping. So I headed out in my old blue SUV. I drove straight to the South Side Mall, which is huge and includes 8 different department stores, 6 restaurants, a bowling alley, and 4 ice cream parlors, just to give you an idea. I went to the baby bonanza first. As I was loading my cart with pink and blue receiving blankets, sleep sacks, washable stuffed animals, and onesies, I noticed the bookshelf with baby books. I settled on a giant Mother Goose book and a few other childhood classics. As I was perusing a book of recipes for babies, a smiling sales lady asked whether I needed any help. Well, I just found out I'm going to be a grandmother, so I'm in a hurry. I only have 7 months left to shop. I guess the sales lady must have shared my joy because she started laughing. Anyway, she clearly was a real expert on preparing for babies. "Have the parents-to-be picked a name yet?" she asked, showing me a beautiful book of baby names. "I don't know," I said. "This book presents thousands of names for girls and boys. It's never too early to decide on the name the child will be identified with for a lifetime." I realized this was the most important aspect of baby preparations, so I gladly forked over the $40 for the names book. I knew Casey and Justin would be thrilled with so many adorable choices. When I got home, I immediately opened the baby names book and started scanning names for boys and names for girls. The names were listed in alphabetical order. Little gold stars appeared next to the most popular ones. I began to feel a little overwhelmed by all the things to consider when naming a baby. I was remembering how right after I gave birth, my husband had said, "Just pick a name." I immediately thought of Justin without considering the implications. Poor Justin. As he was growing up, teachers would say things like, "You're just in time for story time," and "This just in, Justin won the spelling bee." I have felt guilty ever since. So I hope you will understand why I did what I did next. I got out my black felt tip marker and started combing through the names. I only wanted to shield my future grandchild from what could otherwise turn out to be a real disaster. However, I reasoned that if I obliterated too many names, Casey and Justin might resent it, might even see me as too controlling. So I decided to be judicious. I only blackened out Justin and Cassandra and its derivative, Casey, just in case.